but I kind of, yeah, I got unreasonable. I think I was so desperate. I was so desperate for change. I had two kids, a 7-year-old, 7-month-old. I was on the brink of divorce. This was, two kids, two different dads. It was never meant to be the story. It just wasn't. I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed. And I just thought, well, if I've been following a certain path, a certain memo, and I'm still unhappy, I'm still conflicted, then shoot, I'm just going to throw this out and try something different. And there's a possibility someone's going to think I'm crazy. Someone's going to think I've lost my mind. And that's what the unreasonable is. But they would, because the majority of us have been told to be reasonable. Now, I'm not saying we need to go about and start creating protests and wars and all of that. No, just change it up a little bit. Most of us are fearful, and I speak about it in my book, and as you know, with Tony, once you learn to dance with fear, life isn't that difficult after that. It's uncomfortable, but it's not that difficult.
2, 1, 0.
Hello, Yemi, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited because I get a different feel and vibe already. So I'm excited to see what comes out of my mouth. Thank you for having me.
Before we dive in, can you tell me a little bit about your passion and how you discovered it?
My passion is so unsexy, it's unreal. My passion is honestly waking people up to their untapped potential, which is, I believe,
kind of sexy.
Yeah, okay. I haven't finished, but I like that. Thank you. First part, sexy. Untapping their potential, but first by looking at their trauma. And that's the bit that I don't think we want to do. And it's my passion, and it's my passion because the journey's so beautiful. I mean, my daughter calls me savage. My partner says, you don't show much emotion, but I cry when I see people realizing, wow, I was like this because of this. And now I know I have a choice to change it. That will move me time and time again. And that's why it's my mission.
Right. Can you share a little bit about your life story and how you healed your trauma?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got trauma. I mean, when I did my TED talk, it's acknowledging that based on the statistics, I mean, in the US, 70% of adults have experienced at least one traumatic event. That means every other person you see has gone through something distressing. So when I speak about mine, I say that because I want to start off by saying that I don't believe my trauma is bigger than yours. It may have impacted me more, but it doesn't make anybody else's insignificant, which is why we need to look at it. The one traumatic incident that I remember that I definitely think altered who I was really meant to be was, as a child, my uncle abusing his power, his sexual power to be specific, over me. And the memory I have is of me as a 7-8-year-old. Now, I know it happened more than once, but that's the memory I have. And most people know that you start to imprint a child's personality between the ages of being born and 8 years old. Mm-hmm. So acknowledging that only a couple of years ago, and I'm, fast approaching 40, was pretty phenomenal, because I knew it happened. I don't even know if I knew it was wrong. Mm-hmm. I've had to do the work to realize how wrong it was. And I only knew how wrong it was because I'm a mother. Mm-hmm. I couldn't bear either my child or another child going through that. And that was when I realized, you have not looked at your trauma. How come you can have empathy and sympathy for another child, but you are yet to nurture the child that went through that and the adult she became? So that was when the journey really started. And honestly, in the depths of it, that was only about 3-4 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
But regardless of not looking into your trauma, I mean, you've been at age 24, you were homeless and pregnant.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah, you'd think it's funny whenever that comes up, because that got featured in the newspaper that then went global. And I know people jump onto the sensationalism of stories. I had gone to university, so I talk about the memo. You know, I've got my first book, well, the only book I've got out at the moment is Did You Get the Memo? Because I effing didn't. Genuinely, it's me questioning it. I thought I was following the memo, but they forgot to tell me that there's some really difficult parts like relationships. And I had graduated from uni and I just thought, oh my gosh, there's got to be more to life. I can't just go to school, study, and then I'm meant to just go to work and work till I'm 60. So I figured having a child would be the next best thing. And I was a bit of a mini rebel, so I didn't get married first, as the memo says we should. And being of African, Nigerian descent in particular, there's a certain order. We are to follow the memo in every possible way. And I was still living at home at the time, having just recently graduated from uni. And with as much love as they possibly could give me, my parents said, you're gonna need to find somewhere to go, because I didn't want to get married. Okay. You know, I'd managed to convince myself that I shouldn't have to get married just because I'm pregnant. And that required me to sleep on a few people's sofas and at some point just sit outside the door of what we call the town hall, because they were the only ones who were going to be able to house me. So I had to be put into emergency housing.
Wow.
And that, you know, I share that period because even though I don't recall that having any traumatic impacts on me, although it probably did, but not major magnitude, I'm aware that that can be traumatic for other people, and it was a big deal.
So how did you get yourself out of that situation?
Oh, look, the first thing was I needed to swallow my pride. It was bruised. My ego was definitely bruised. You know, I graduated with a first class in mechanical engineering. That it was huge. I thought, oh, okay, I'm doing all right. And then it just felt like a crash. Like I was pregnant. My friends were like already climbing up the career ladder. So my ego was bruised, and I realized that I needed to not overthink this and go and ask for help from the government. It hadn't dawned on me the stigma that was attached to asking the government for help. It hadn't dawned on me that, you know, we would live potentially, you know, when I was pregnant, I was put into a house that typically is the halfway house for people who are coming off drugs or come out of prison.
Oh my goodness. What an experience.
Yeah. And I was not prepared for that. So it was
You're like, what am I doing
up in my room.
How did I get myself?
Correct. Yeah.
Very
exactly.
surprising.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I thought or how I was living. So, you know, and I think I needed to hit that rock bottom, because what I then started doing was, I started going back to the council, to the town hall, and borderline begging, saying, look, I really need you to house me. I will pay the rent. I'm good for the money. I just can't pay the big private rents. Can you please get me out of that house? Because I was due to give birth in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And
I
think, yeah. I mean, speaking it out feels a bit, you went through that. And I must have had some guides, because it was either this woman, she put me in a temporary accommodation, which the rent was ridiculous, but they were helping me with it. But I was just grateful. It was a one bed. And I was just really grateful that I was going to be able to take my baby from the hospital, not to a halfway house.
And so where did you go from there? Because today you're this, you know, very successful woman. You teach other people about success. You teach them about healing traumas. You are an author. You're living your potential every day. But how did you get from that place to here? Like, what were the core beliefs, and did you have any mentors? Did you have any guides? Was it just your inner guide and intuition?
There was a bit of inner guidance and intuition, but I didn't know what that was. So it might as well be no. You know, I only know what that is now because I've done the work. But to be honest, the first part is I got really uncomfortable. That was it. I think if anybody's listening, when you get really uncomfortable, like you feel broken down, if you find yourself as a broken record, telling the same story to yourself or to your friends, it usually means that you're at that broken point and there's an opportunity. Once again, I wouldn't have known that. I just think life kind of forced me into it. But to be really fair, the biggest break for me is change of environment. I think I'm a bit extreme according to the standards of the world, because my butterfly moment of transmuting some of my pain to power was when I moved. Firstly, I moved from London to Japan. I lived in Japan for a bit. And
Where
then
in Japan?
moved from Japan, Okinawa.
Okinawa. Oh my God. I lived in Japan for 3.5 years. I've never been to
Did
Okinawa.
you?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so gorgeous. It's so beautiful.
日本の大好きとても大好き。
Ah, arigatou gozaimasu. I loved it. My daughter thrived there. I definitely want to go back.
It's like Hawaii.
It's
amazing.
It is.
It's where the oldest people in the world live, because they live in such a healthy way. They live, eating healthy foods, working and working the land and being in community. It's a really magical place.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. It was profound. And
how did you get to Japan?
Filmed,
how did you get to Japan?
Well, I love this. We're going everywhere. I love it. I met a guy online and we got married. And he is a US. Yeah, I told you the memo is crazy. He worked for the US Air Force, and that's where he was stationed. So when we started dating, he was stationed in South Korea, which I did go to visit. But then when we got married, he was stationed in Japan. And so I up and left. I went there. I think that was probably the beginning of what we probably now call depression. But I'm a high functioning depressant. Like if there's a glass and it's fully depressed, I'm half full when I have my down moments.
Right.
And so that move was that. It was a saving grace because the trauma was still following me in London. And in my documentary, I highlight that. But it still wasn't, there was something that still wasn't right. And I have I'm no longer married to that man, but we have a son together and we've got a really great relationship. It was part of my journey, but it wasn't where the healing was to begin. So for me to go from, as you asked, from this being homeless to where I am now, I needed to change my physical environment. For me, it was physical. Mentally, I don't think I would have had the capacity to do it where family and friends were, because I think it's Einstein, or one of those geniuses, that said it's very difficult to solve a problem in the same environment in which it was created.
Yeah, I really like the song "Let It Go."
Frozen. Are we going to start singing, please?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there is a line that always speaks to me when I'm alone at home and just singing out loud to myself. Because my son is small. He's like 2 and 3 months, and we listen to Disney songs. And honestly, I listen to the song even if I didn't have him.
Yeah,
but
they're words.
I forgot the word exactly, but it's like, it's amazing how some distance makes everything seem small. When you have the distance from your problems, when you go away, when you look from a different angle, you actually see it from a different angle. So you're not in it. You're not in the picture. So I know I read on your website that you studied with Tony Robbins, and I did too. And Tony Robbins says that in order to change your state, you want to change your focus, you want to change your language, and your physicality. So physicality is the way you stand, but I guess physicality can be the physical place that you're in. You're just like, this is not working right here. This energy is bringing me down. I'm going to go away and change. And like you, and I resonate with you. I mean, we both lived in Japan, and I moved to the States from Israel, and I know that when you're in a different place, you can see things differently. And plus, so what did you do to take yourself out of that state of functioning depression?
Mm. I had to get unreasonable.
I like that. Tell me more.
Yeah. I don't know who I heard it from. Like, no knowledge is new knowledge. We are all recycling the same thing, which is great. We're just applying different energy. We've always been taught to be reasonable.
But if we apply different energy,
reasonable.
do we really recycle things? Because it's different energy.
Okay, Orion. I agree. Oh, that was so good. I agree. You're absolutely right. And you just saying that continues to give me permission, because I usually say that because I don't want people to think I came up with it. But the energy we put behind it, and it's a big reason why I think whoever wants to speak should speak, because the energy you put behind a message is so important. Like, already I want you on my podcast because I want to know your story. I don't believe people move environments for no reason. But I kind of, I got unreasonable. I think I was so desperate. I was so desperate for change. You know, I had 2 kids, a 7-year-old, 7-month-old. I was on the brink of divorce. This was, 2 kids, 2 different dads. It was never meant to be the story. It just wasn't. I felt ashamed. I felt embarrassed. And I just thought, well, if I've been following a certain path, a certain memo, and I'm still unhappy, I'm still conflicted, then shoot, I'm just going to throw this out and try something different. And there's a possibility someone's going to think I'm crazy. Someone's going to think I've lost my mind. And that's what the unreasonable is. But they would, because the majority of us have been told to be reasonable. Now, I'm not saying we need to go about and start creating protests and wars and all of that. No, just change it up a little bit. Most of us are fearful, and I speak about it in my book, and as you know, with Tony, once you learn to dance with fear, life isn't that difficult after that. It's uncomfortable, but it's not that difficult. So that's what I did.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But don't you think that sometimes, like when I look at the younger me, she used to dance with fear much better. Now I'm more like set in my ways. I don't want change. I don't want things to change. But change is inevitable. And I like what you said about, like, the only thing we are certain about is that we're going to have change in our lives. But we want to have one of my Kabbalah teachers talking about certainty beyond logic. When you go after your dreams, you can't, like you said, live the memo. You have to have certainty beyond logic that what you're dreaming of is going to come true. So I guess this was kind of like the voice inside of you, that everything's going to work out regardless.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much everything. I don't know, it might have been Jack Canfield. I figured out what was my biggest fear. What is it I fear the most in the whole world? Not the trivial stuff, not, I don't know, I might lose my hair, or I'm going to get, not the trivial stuff, not the superficial stuff. My biggest fear, the one that would make me quake in my boots, tended to be going on a plane. And I thought, I'm scared of flying. It wasn't that. It's just because I don't have any control over it. So therefore, that's where my fear is. So I just got really clear. And then the next fear was, if I have no control over it, I might be dying at somebody else's mistake. And then I realized, but everybody dies. We know this. Unless someone's got something else, there might be some, I don't know, Elon Musk might be working on how to elongate our life or whatever. But that's a guarantee. I'm going to die. So what really am I scared of? And then it was actually that if I die, my kids don't know what I've done, my view of my story. I haven't told my loved ones. And so I said, well, why wait till you die to do that? Start doing it now. And that's what I did. I wrote my book. I made sure every time before I got on the plane, I love you very much. I'd send them videos. It might be overkill. But I got used to know what my fear was. And the minute I knew that, if anything I did, whether it was starting a business, moving to a different world, if it was not going to result in my greatest fear, I did it. I'd survive. That's how I do things now. Now I need to manage stress because I do make some decisions. I've got some businesses that I think, would I do it again? No. Do I regret doing it? No, because I've learned a lot and I would do it differently.
How do you manage being a mom? You have 3 kids now? 2?
Two kids.
Two.
Yeah.
How do you manage being a working mom? And I think you have more than one business, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And doing all the things that you do.
Yeah. Orion, easy. I break the rules. I break the rules that I create.
Tell me more about breaking the rules. I want to know more about that, because I'm like, being a mom, like since I became a mom, there is something that happens when you become a mom.
Yeah.
You get the mom's guilt. Like I don't feel like I'm ever doing enough for, even though I'm like a very dedicated mom. I don't feel like I never do enough, or like I need to do like, it always feels like there is some guilt, like I'm not, because you see people and you see what they do, and they are moms and they're entrepreneurs and they do this and they do that, and they seem to accomplish so many things all at once. And sometimes I can't, I always put the bar so high, and my coaches are like, take the bar down, take it out, take it out. It's fine. You're fine. How are you managing everything? What tell me more about breaking the rules.
You just reminded me of something. I also, and something we need to acknowledge, I think when people become parents, and I've noticed this in men as well, but when we become parents, our fear and our risk appetite is suppressed. And I think it's suppressed because we've got extra life. Yeah. I think it's suppressed because caring for more than one person. So it's a balancing act. So I think it's to acknowledge
when my baby was born, for the first year, I think, every time I went behind the wheel, I was shaking. Yes. There was so much fear just driving with the little baby. I was like, oh my goodness, this is scary.
Yeah. And I wish we would talk. I mean, I know we talk about it jovially, but I actually really want to know the psychology behind it. I want to know, what is it? Is this the human love? Is this we were willing to put ourselves at risk, but we're not willing to put the child? Why do we have more love for the child than we? Like, I'm really intrigued. I really love human behavior. But I think if we can acknowledge that, then, for me, there's power in acknowledging it, because then it doesn't hold that control over you.
But a lot of
I think that's the first thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of time people will do more for others than they'll do for themselves. Yes. You see the cases of, something happened, the baby is locked in the car, and the grandma gets this extraordinary strength and managed to lift the car. Yes. But if it was for her, it probably would never have that.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Why is that? I'm intrigued. The breaking the rules one, in how I do it, because it's breaking the rules meditation. I am go, go, go. I'm getting less of that now, but I've not always, in recent years, become a go, go, go. It was very much masculine energy that I was using to achieve things, but I now use feminine energy to balance it, create love, equity, diversity. So I love the mixture of both. However, meditation, transcendental meditation, my partner introduced me to that, was really powerful for me, because out of 20 minutes, I might really only have silence for 2, maybe 5 minutes max, and I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. But what that did to my brain and my body was almost like it gave me 4 more hours in the day. Wow. Like, I mean, it's the best way I describe how powerful meditation is for me. There is something in the peace. It's either that I end up solving problems in my subconsciousness, but what would typically take me 2 hours to do, all of a sudden I can do in 15. That's what meditation does for me. So I get more time in my day. So that's number one. The second thing is breaking the rules. Rules were created for us. We know that. I'm sure you and your listeners and previous guests have probably spoken to death about whether it's patriarchy or what role a woman should be, the gender roles that I think hurt all genders. Those rules that are imposed on us. But then I also think there are rules we create ourselves. For instance, I created a rule that I must cook meals for my kids. And I created that rule because in previous relationships, it was expected I do that. But I don't want to cook sometimes. And so I was okay. And so I started breaking the rules and either hired a chef to cook some meals, ordered healthy meals, or got really comfortable with my partner cooking meals, which was once again challenging bias. So that's what I mean by break the rules. And I also created a rule, I must pick him up from daycare every day. I need to be the first face. Like, I was knackered. Why am I following archaic rules that don't work for me anymore, because I now work. And I now work because I've been on a solo income family for forever.
Mm-hmm.
So why am I breaking my back? So I break my rules rather than break my back.
Right. And what's your take on structures in society? Like the structure of our schooling system, the structure of our governments.
Yeah. Orion, that's a big question. It's broken. Either it's broken, or some people saying it was always built that way. It's not conducive.
Yeah,
I don't think it is,
like,
and I'm so.
Yeah, even if you look at the school system and the way we teach kids to obey and to never break the rules, and because the idea of,
and not to talk back,
not really question things. It's either you get an A in the test or you're worthless.
Correct.
It's not about
no other skills. Where are you on the diversity spectrum? That person might be so good at sums or puzzles, like, and it's not having a go at the individuals. The teachers are great. It's the system. And the reason why I do my work is that you might be a teacher in the system who knows the system doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have influence?
Right.
Can you create a petition to change that or introduce that? That's what we need, because as individuals, there is so much power if we look at our own stuff, and therefore there's so much change we can make as a collective. But I personally think the pandemic has brought an opportunity. Yes, it's really sad. So many people have lost people. But I think the discomfort might be here for a while, until those who have the voice, of which is all of us, but those who also have the influence, say, okay, so what can we change about this system that wasn't working before?
Right. So you're talking a lot about finding your voice. And let's say this teacher that is seeing that the system's broken, but she's indoctrinated into the system. She can't really, she doesn't feel like she's got the power. How can one find that power within a system? I feel like we live in a world now that doesn't matter what's your opinion about the pandemic, you're going to be eaten alive if you're going to talk about it. Yeah, agreed. It's the cancel culture for having a voice. There is censorship by the media. People censor each other. The family starts, people of the same family stop talking to each other because of that new, like, I feel like COVID became a religion.
Yes.
And I've
never heard it that way. Yeah.
Some people are more religious than others, and some people are more radical than others. So how can one find a voice in a world that doesn't encourage you to speak up? Like, there are some topics that, cool, talk about it. You want to talk about self-empowerment? Great. Talk about changing something in the system? Zip it.
I've got to give you an example. My daughter in Australia, I mean, I was told this, but the ignorance, which really is racism, especially in schools, is high. And some really ignorant and racist things were said. And I had enough. And so I decided I was going to start a petition to get the Department of Education to bring critical race theory. Now, I use the word knowing that term's already very loaded. And I don't know much about it, but I know it started in America. And a lot of, I don't know whether they're left or right wing, I never really follow it, really don't want it. And it's making even Black, Indigenous people of color say, Yemi, maybe change it. Don't use the word critical race theory, because it really gets non-BIPOC people's guard up. Mm-hmm. And I'm still trying to understand the feeling and emotion. And I'm, you know what, I'm flexible. The most flexible person controls the environment. I will happily change the wording of my petition. But fundamentally, what I'm trying to say is we want to educate people in schools about race and the whole ideology of racism. That's my point. It's not to bring anybody down, but really just tell the truth from a different perspective, so that these ignorant comments stop impacting people.
Right.
Now, I share all of that to say that in order for people to find their voice in a system or in a cancel culture, there are a few things that I think we need to figure out. Mm-hmm. First, what is your fear? You know, I went back and I read or listened to the book Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and it's phenomenal. Apart from the fact that it's heavily biased towards men, there's so much gold in it. And there are 6 fears they talk about, which I can't remember all of them, but one of them is fear of death, fear of ill health, fear of poverty, of which a lot of these were brought about due to the pandemic of the Spanish flu in 13 or 16. And the one that was brought about, we think, by media was fear of criticism. Now, bearing in mind that this book was written in the early 1900s, it's still prevalent today. Most of us do not want to speak because of the fear of criticism. We no longer live in a world, in most parts, because I do know there are some parts that you can easily be killed or imprisoned for speaking out. And we have, you know, you look at Malala's story, and I can imagine where elsewhere around the world. But some of us are in that safe place. That's where our privilege lies, that we can speak. And I encourage people to speak with empathy and compassion. More people will hear you that way. So firstly, figure out that your fear is probably fear of criticism. Then you got to go do the work. It all leads back to trauma. Why do you have a fear of criticism? Because I've got a fear of abandonment. I don't want my partner to leave me. I don't want my friends to absolve themselves. I don't want to lose my job. Just figure it out. And once you sit with that fear, you figure out whether that potential reality is worth the cause. So you've got to go back to the cause. And then on top of that, look at some of your heroes in the past. They don't even need to be like the Martin Luther Kings of the world. It could be your mum, your grandmum, someone in your family who did not stand for BS or who stood for a cause. What did they do? How did they do it? You draw strength and you then make a call. I just want to put my head down and follow the memo, and there's nothing wrong with that because it's what we all know. Or I want to make a change and I have to be prepared for one of my worst fears to materialize, which isn't that big a deal because I think this is how I will work through it.
Right. So what are the first steps to looking at your own trauma? Because you told me that only in the last 3 to 4 years you actually looked at your trauma. What was your process and how would you advise someone to take a look in their own trauma? Because it's scary. It's scary to look back. Some people will never, unfortunately will never look at that because it was so traumatic. But what kind of words of encouragement or steps can you give one who's you need to hear that?
Yeah. Everybody's got different things, and it's partly the reason why I'm doing documentaries, because I'm trying to bring therapy and different modalities to your screens for those who either A, can't afford it or are too scared. Talk therapy was really important for me. I mean, I couldn't afford it 5-6 years ago. So there's always a solution. So I found that there was a psychology group that has students who are studying psychology who are still learning to become psychologists. It was $20 for the hour compared to the $200 that I now pay. It was $20, and they just had the questions to ask, and they created the silence in the space, and I just spoke it out. And if it's funny because we used to call people who talk to themselves mad. They know something. To speak out, especially if you don't have someone to listen back or you don't have someone to talk to, is powerful, because in one of my documentaries that I'll be releasing in the next week, the psychologist says, when you speak out, the words inside your body is like Scrabble. Until you speak it out, it doesn't land. And then you have another meeting. And this is why I'm grateful to people like yourself, Brian, and others, is that you give people the platform to speak in the podcast. I'm not just here to speak and gift other people. I'm also here to heal, because I know more through your questions. I know more about me. Firstly, my brain does the thinking. And because I'm in touch with my body, I then now know the words. So that is just to speak. Either find therapy. There are students out there who are still learning, so that's a really good space. And if you really want to, without being labeled anything, you could actually just look at your mirror and say, I'm feeling really sad today because this happened, and this reminds me of that time when my brother did this or my sister did this. That I find talk therapy amazing. However, there's so many other things. I also did tapping, I don't know if people know about emotional freedom. I love that. I love it. That helped me open my second business, which almost killed me psychologically. Yeah.
I think it's tappingsolution.com. That's the website for tapping. And people can find tons of videos about it. It's basically tapping different areas of the body and relax, and it somehow affects your neurology, and you can let go of things on a cellular and neurological level. Yeah. It's like acupuncture. Mental acupuncture, yes.
I agree. That's exactly. I think that certain points. And even just speaking to you, like, I really forget that I can just do that in the car. Just tap. I mean, when you see certain people and you see their legs shaking or they're nervous, it's not the same, but that's them trying to regulate themselves. And there's always just a little way. And sometimes before I go on stage, if I'm a little bit nervous, I just just so nobody says, "What are you doing?" I just kind of just do that, just to re-regulate myself. It's powerful.
Right. And so when you have talk therapy or talk to yourself in the mirror or do tapping, and while verbalizing your concerns and stories and fears, what does it do? Like, how does that eliminate the trauma? Is it just the awareness of what happened that heals?
I think I think more than anything, it gives empathy. It gives you empathy for yourself. I don't know about you, but there's so many of us that we make a mistake. We might not say it out, but we think, "Oh, you're so stupid. Why would you do that again? Why would you date the same person who did this to you the last time? Why, Tony Robbins says this so well. That's the equivalent of like going to a baby who's learning to walk, and then they take their first step at 10 months and they fall down, and you start shouting at them saying, "Damn, you're such a dummy. Like, why won't you learn how to walk quickly? Like, can't you see the rest of us doing it?" Why do we think we've got to get everything figured out? Maya Angelou said she was going to keep learning till the day she died, and I'm sure she did. So the first thing it does when you go through any form of healing is it gives empathy to yourself, and it's needed. And as a result of giving it to yourself, then can you give it to others. It's just, people talk about intergenerational trauma. That is it. Intergenerational trauma is we just, sometimes it's in our DNA, but there's another level where we just haven't cleaned our own stuff. And one way or another, we pass it down to the next generation. So doing it gives you empathy for self and for others.
And how do we take that trauma and transmute it into power?
That last step, the juiciest part, the part that I believe I'm in and I just love, 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 is you contribute. You contribute. If you went through something or you experienced something, one of the worst things of your life, and you are on the journey to healing, which is continuous, I don't think it just stops. There's a possibility you can help somebody else who went through that. And it could be anything. It could be anything. I tell the story in my TEDx of the boy whose, goldfish was sadly killed by a bully in school because the glass bowl was smacked out of his hand.
I remember that story.
That materialized to the point that he couldn't really trust anyone, including himself. And he probably just felt the need to follow the memo, got married, but he knew he was closed off, and he was closed off because he didn't feel worthy. That all stems from that thing. He didn't feel Can you imagine what a life from that? Because he didn't feel worthy. But his contribution, his transmutation, not only was him coming into this event that we were both at and speaking about it, but he could decide to create a program that stops bullying.
Right.
So that's how you transmute pain to power. And my view is that you try not to fixate on the perpetrator. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Compassion Prison Project.
No.
They go into prisons to look at perpetrators who have either done murder, rape, other things, to hear what happened to them. Now, that doesn't have to be my mission, but that's somebody else's mission. And they are probably doing it because maybe they were the perpetrator at some point, but really feel bad about it. And that's how they contribute. You transmute your pain and your trauma to power by doing just that, contributing.
It's beautiful. I think this is my life's journey. I think the reason why I became a coach and a therapist is because of that, because of the pain that I've been through. And when I look at my pain, I feel like pain sometimes it's like a gift with a bow on the bottom. When you get it, you don't know it's a gift. But maybe years down the road or decades, kind of turn this around. You open the bow and you're like, oh, wow, I had to go through that so I can, use my soul purpose here in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk to you for so long, like so much longer, but I got to be respectful of
I'll have to come back again.
Yes, please. Before we say goodbye for now, what are your 3 top tips to living a stellar life?
Ooh. It's probably the same as my TED Talk. I think first that acknowledge who you are by sitting with the discomfort and uncomfortable questions. The second top tip will be open. Empty your cup, because you only learn when there's space in the cup for you to have more, but you have to be open. And the second tip would be contribute. Ask, how can I help somebody else as a result of this awakening?
Beautiful.
That's how you live a stellar life.
Yes. And where can people get your book, and where can people find you, work with you, take your workshop, go to your speaking engagements?
So many things. I can't do all the social media. So if you want to connect with the real Yemi, where I love to engage with my community, it's Instagram, and that's yemi.penn, so yemi.penn. Similarly, yemipenn.com is my website where you'll see anything I'm doing. You can order my book through there or Amazon. And I'm really keen. I like to hear people. So I'd love for you to connect with me, and I want to know what your story is. I love knowing people's stories, but that's the best way to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I love how
likewise
cool and genuine you are. It's very, very nice. Thank you for healing the world by healing yourself.
Oh, beautiful.
And thank you, listeners. Remember to acknowledge who you are, be open, contribute, and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time.